What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is the first ever bonus episode of the show. Today, me and Will Porter are interviewing Magnus Panvidya about his new group, End the Damn Wars. This is a really important unity coalition with a sole focus of calling on our leaders to end these endless interventions that we've been in for decades on end now. They're doing major rallies on the 20th anniversary of September 11th coming up in the next month. And so if you all go to endthedamnwars.org or follow End the Damn Wars on Twitter or follow Magnus on Twitter, you could keep up and find rallies potentially in your area, figure out how to contact him to get involved. So this is, I think, a really cool interview. We talk about a lot of really important stuff, not necessarily anything news related, but just getting into the importance of growing the movement and the importance of the anti-war movement. So share the show. You find it at the Libertarian Institute. Video versions of the show at Rumble, Odysee, and YouTube. Social media accounts at Facebook, MeWe, and Twitter. You could donate to the show at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you could support the show and get yourself some sweet CBD products by doing your CBD shopping at Paloma Verde. The URL is palomaverdecbd.com. They got a huge variety of CBD products, even stuff for your dog. So go there, check them out. Again, palomaverdecbd.com. Use the promo code PEACE, PEACE, to save yourself 25% off when you spend $75 or more. All right, now here's the interview with Magnus. Hey, Magnus, how's it going? Welcome to Conflicts of Interest.
Hey, happy to be here. Like I said, I knew both you guys through Twitter, so it's nice to actually talk about this. So
yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to have you on today. You know, usually we're breaking down the news, but I want to do something a little different because I think what you're doing is one of the more important things going on right now for the anti-war movement. And so I want to talk about this this group that, I don't know, did you start it or you seem to be the main person plugging it online, End the Damn Wars. And so just wherever, you know, how to get started and what is it and what are you trying to do?
Yeah. So people that might not be familiar with me, I started this whole crazy concept, not like me exclusively, but a bunch of us in kind of the liberty movement of the Unity Coalition. We were trying to get all of these groups together to like fight on issues, and me getting like popular on Twitter and going viral and everything in January and going on Alex Jones and Jimmy Dore kind of really exploded that. And I can't just, didn't want to just intellectually, conceptually talk about unity. I kind of wanted to start putting these things into practice, and I couldn't really like figure out a means to that much. But I think it was April, I flew out to Washington, D.C. for a Julian Assange event that was put on by the Action for Assange people. And they're also kind of like a post-partisan group that have like a bunch of different political suasions and everything. And there we were sitting down, and a lot of kind of where I come from is when I was much younger, I was a big part of the anti-war movement in the 2000s when it kind of existed in the meat space with like the Answer Coalition and all that. Yeah. And obviously all of those people disappeared when Obama got elected. And that kind of led me down the path of where I am politically now. So we were all just sitting there like ex-Tulsi Gabbard campaign people, ex-Bernie Sanders campaign people, people from the Green Party, people from the People's Party, me being there, being like the guy that knows all the libertarians and everything. And we were like, hey, why don't we, try to like bring back the anti-war movement? It was just kind of like a over some beers, just kind of like a shitpost idea. And me and a couple people from the Action Assange people are like, okay, we're going to throw this together. And it was just super like, we're like, a lot of the Assange protests are maybe 40 people, 50 people tops in DC. And that's what we were expecting it to be. And it really caught fire. And like Scott was like, yeah, I'll speak. And like Spike Cohen said he would speak. And there's a couple other people who were announcing that are like pretty big names that are like, yeah, I'll totally show up and blah, blah, blah. And it really like, it blew up to be this big thing. And like, we were like, okay, well now we have like, this was probably like 2.5 months ago or something like that. It's like, okay, now we have this thing, and kind of what I'm most known for, is tripping and falling into success without any kind of plan. Because that speech I gave in January, I expected it to be like to like 5 people and a dog and like a single journalist, and ended up getting like 1 million views and kickstarting all of this. And that's kind of what's also happening with End the Damn Wars. So now we've embraced the responsibility. It's a really small team, maybe 6 people tops that are like main organizers, and maybe like 10 other people that are like helping directly. And we're doing all of this. And now it's gotten to the point where not only we have the DC event, but there's a Denver event, there's a Portland event, there's a Seattle event, Scottsdale, Arizona, Fort Lauderdale. There might be another one in Florida, New York, and it's spreading. And we're just trying to, I don't know, just like bring it back. Because as I just talked about on the show I just came here from with Scott and Adam Kokesh, the biggest problem with the anti-war movement, and really any protest movement, you can say the same thing about Black Lives Matter, you can say the same thing about the Tea Party and like the Trump revolution or whatever, right, is that you can only consistently mobilize people if a political party is involved, and the political party is only going to get involved because they're going to view it as like an election campaign thing. They're going to get on stage and be like, I'm so-and-so running for U.S. Congress as a Republican, and I hate war. Please donate to my campaign. Like that's, right, when you see crowds of hundreds of thousands of people, like those people were bussed in by an organization that's like giving money or in like getting donated from the DNC or the RNC and everything. And I hate that. And I don't, because that's not how these organizations like form and then disappear when their people get elected. So the whole point of the Unity Coalition broadly, and then the End the Damn Wars campaign, is like, hey, no, we're going to prove that third parties and random individuals and organizations can get together without like some ulterior motive or whatever, and preach this unified message against war. And most importantly to me, from several different directions. Because like, if you're a libertarian, the Ron Paul argument against war back and forth, which is mostly like an economic argument of how it's just a giant waste of money, it's unconstitutional and everything. But then if you go talk to like somebody like Jill Stein will bring up everything about how much like there's like 900 sites across the planet that are almost irreparably polluted from the U.S. military, and like how the U.S. military is the biggest emitter of carbon emissions in the entire world and all of that. And it's like, oh, I never thought of that perspective. And then you might get like some like South American communist on and be like, oh, hey, here's all this like crazy imperialistic shit that the CIA is doing that you probably never heard of. And that's part of the military industrial complex too, of like going to these indigenous villages and paying like death squads to kill everybody so they can mine lithium to build drones and shit. And, maybe a libertarian never heard that perspective. So it's like, let's get all these people on stage at the same time and show that not only are we all united against war, but we also are going to address not just the bombs and drones and tanks and obvious stuff, but like the things CIA does and like USAID does, and, wars we're involved in that people aren't even aware we're involved in. We still have, Navy SEALs running around like Brazil and Mexico fighting the drug war. Like, that's the warfare state. So yeah, long-winded, but yeah, that's the whole story and kind of the goals and objectives with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, Kyle and I, like, we are coming from more of a libertarian kind of anarcho-capitalist perspective, but like, I think both of us have always been open to like all the anti-war voices. Like, I've always been down to listen to what even the progressives and the communists and all the, various anti-imperialist forces think. And I do think they do need to be brought together. They can't be kept off in these silos. So I do like the sort of unity message that you're coming with here. I also like that the speech that got you so much attention. I'm glad that got so big, that your message really is one of unity, and people apparently want to hear that. So it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely hurting casts with blow dryers though, because like a lot of people want to do unity things until you have to be around people you don't agree with. That's that's the big thing. I mentioned it like I said on the previous show, of there was somebody who was going to show up and speak and then backed out because they saw Spike Cohen was going to be there. And I'm like, okay, but
Spike Cohen was the objection. Oh yeah, man.
Like, because like all of the speakers are lefties besides Spike and Scott Horton. And they said they didn't want to attend a right-wing event. They're probably not talking about Scott Horton. So the only person I could think of is because Spike's there. And I'm like, really?
Like, man, it kind of defeats the point of the whole unity thing if you refuse to even tolerate or be around someone with, you know, different views like that. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we've had a couple like huge victories with this already before they even happened. Of like, in Scottsdale, you have the Arizona Green Party co-organizing with the Arizona LP, and
Nice.
it's like,
That's awesome.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, like that is exactly what I'm trying to do here. And I've like, the People's Party has kind of imploded, so it's a little weird, but I'm still trying to get people from the People's Party involved, and like just like anybody. I'd reach out to the DSA, but they hate me, so yeah. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, so I mean, on this show, I believe our most listened to downloaded show is Danny Sturgeon, who is no libertarian at all. I mean,
yeah, he's actually speaking too. It's him and Scott are like the mainline speakers.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where I want to go and ask you. Besides Scott Horton and Spike Cohen, who and now Danny, who are some of the other like speakers that our audience are probably gonna recognize?
I mean, I don't know if you'd recognize them, but there are people important. Garland Nixon, he's actually on the national board of the American Civil Liberties Union. He's speaking, so like the ACLU's like in a way involved.
No, we've talked about Garland on the past on the show. He did a lot of good coverage on his show he had at the time on Russiagate and stuff like that. And he's Fault Lines. He's pretty diehard on this issue, and I really like his take a lot of times.
He's great. So Garland Nixon's going to be there. Nice. I wish there's so many people that have said they're going to speak, but we haven't locked it in yet. But like there are some names that if they like fully commit to it, because we're in like the talking phase, and they're like, yeah, I would love to, but send me more details, which is always like, you know, that could mean a lot of different things. But there are some big names of like, particularly people on the left that may or may not show up, and we really hope they do, because it'll be crazy to have them there. And I just really wish I could announce it. It's so annoying because we haven't put out a lot of content on the page. It's just because like we'll have somebody say like, yeah, I'll speak, and then they back out, or like, yeah, we'll be there, and then they'll back. Like the best example of that is the Defend the Guard people, the Defend the Guard legislation people. Yeah. They were supposed to be there, and then they backed out because they had their main event in Massachusetts, but then they're going to be there again. So like over the course of like a week and a half, it was like, yeah, we'll do it. No, we can't do it. Yeah, we'll do it. So it's like,
this is all pretty new though, right? When did you guys actually like create this group?
It was announced in June.
Okay. So yeah, you guys are very early on. So like, yeah, understandable if you're still, you know, trying to get the speakers wrangled and all that. So.
Yeah. And I mean, like, that's the thing is, there seems to be kind of two different perspectives that I both want to reel in. The first one is people are like, oh, it's an anti-war movement. Nobody cares about war. Nobody's going to show up. I'm like, no, like ditch that. Like people are going to show up. But then there's also people that are thinking like, oh, this is going to be like the Answer Coalition 2.0, and we're going to have 10,000 people shut down the streets of D. It's like, our organization is 3 months old. Like we're trying, like if I wanted to have a huge anti-war march, then I could just hit up Code Pink or something like that and organize something with them, but they would be explicitly left-wing protest. Right. Or I could hit up like the Ron Paul people, and that'd be explicitly right-wing protests, and it'd be a lot bigger. But because I'm trying to do a unity thing, it will like be smaller. And the numbers I keep using is like, if it's only 100 people, I'm going to consider that a loss. If it's 1,000 people, I'm going to consider that a win, and anything above or below that, like, great. If it's a Motorhead's first show where it was 2 people and a dog, I'm probably going to be really sad. But like, we'll see what happens. But yeah, just managing expectations in both ways on that, because like, this isn't going to be the civil rights movement march. We're not going to shut down DC. I don't have that kind of pull, and it is like, weird saying it out loud, but I think people understand the context. Thank God for Afghanistan right now, because that's been like the most positive recruiter for the movement and the idea of getting people on board with this, because I was kind of worried that we would just pull out and then nothing would happen and be like, oh, why are you doing an anti-war march? But now that it's been like a biblical shit show in Afghanistan, it's like, hey guys, war is in the public discourse again for the first time in a while. So it's been really nice.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because the withdrawal has been an absolute mess. And, you know, especially the Hawks have taken it to, you know, spin this as this is the only problem of the war. And don't you see, you fools, withdraw and end a war, and look what happens. Weren't things better 2 weeks ago in Afghanistan? Which I don't know if that's exactly true, but they're definitely able to spin that narrative pretty easily. And so have you, like, I don't seen any maybe less interest in the past couple of weeks with how Afghanistan's gone, or has it been the opposite reaction?
Opposite, way more people involved, just because
Awesome.
It just goes to show that not only can we not do, like, you know, you could look at it just from a purely structural standpoint. You put all the moral and the economics behind whatever. The United States has proven that it cannot go into a country and fix that country, and then when they leave the country, it's going to be 10 times worse than when we went into it. Like, that's all Afghanistan has proven. And I mean, you have hilarious moments, which, like, I don't know what kind of, you know, timeline we all fell into when Trump got elected, but we're in this weird alternate universe where yesterday one of the main accounts of the Taliban was retweeting WikiLeaks. And it's like, dang, like, that's just saying that out loud is like, yeah, that's where we're at right now. You know?
Yeah. Now I'm curious, with this group, is the primary goal like street demos and stuff, or do you guys have other plans for other types of actions or content creation or anything like that?
Yeah, so the two goals is street demos, obviously, but also the Unity networking kind of thing is huge to me, because the internet is awful and it's broken us all apart and nobody knows anybody anymore, and it's just garbage. And kind of like my whole how I even got here, like, to lay out the story bit by bit really quick, is I joined with, you know, the Aloha guys, and then we did a protest, and then at one of those protests, a Michigan anti-fascist walked up to me, and then we started talking, and then we became friends. Then the Unity Coalition was formed. Then me, some BLM people, and some anti-fascists went and gave that speech. And then, you know, then I went to DC, and now, like, I, you know, through all of that, through that networking, I have, you know, Spike Cohen going on, you know, Misty Winston's show, who she's like a big, like, left-wing Medicaid for all, like, Assange activist. They're talking. I got, you know, the Mises people in California hooked up with, like, local activists there that probably would have never had a conversation with each other before. Right. And that's more important to me than the numbers of people that show up or, like, the street action itself, because we could have 1 million people in DC, and it's not like the military industrial complex is just going to go, oh, well, that sucks. Well, we're going to end the wars now because people are mad. Like, no. But, like, just having people in the same space, having conversations, building networks, like, doing all of that, that's more important to me, because seeing unity is the most important thing to making unity happen. Because, you know, you can use a dozen examples of, like, you know, what news story always goes viral across the entire United States anytime it happens? The Crips and the Bloods lay down their weapons and have, like, a community barbecue or something. Right. Everybody loves that. It's shared all over Facebook. It hits the news because when you see things like that, not only does it make you feel good, but it shows that it's possible and that we can do these things. So our whole movement and the unity thing blew up because people saw me standing next to someone with a fuck Trump hoodie, standing next to, like, a 3%er dude, talking about how we have to stop fighting and come together. That's how I got here. So to have, like, because I know Ford Fisher is going to be on the ground with us, to have Ford Fisher live streaming and see someone from the ACLU talking to Spike Cohen, talking to somebody from the Green Party, talking to somebody from the Mises Caucus, all in, like, the same place, and, like, having this positive thing happen, that will make more unity stuff possible later. They'll incentivize more people, because just my existence and everything I've done has had, like, people reach out to, like, local BLM chapters, like, you know, the Green Party in Arizona, like, that all came about because of this call for unity. And now you have the Green Party and the LP working together in Arizona. So just, it's building that coalition, building those connections, those contexts. So the next event is even bigger. The next call is even bigger, and it just keeps going up and up from there.
So, you know, me and Will focus on the war issue, and we have our reasons for that. But a lot of people will say it's not the, most important issue. And, there's a lot of people who even say, I really like your show, but it bums me out and I have trouble keeping track of all that stuff. And so I stopped listening. And like, I get it. Like, it kind of makes me mad, but, I do understand in a way too. So why did you pick this to focus on? Because it seems like you have some other interest. I mean, with Second Amendment or anything else that you got going on. Your wall behind you suggests that, you got some other causes that you care about. So why try to pick the war issue? And then with that, I'm curious how much trouble you've had, because there are like other issues. So, for the left, maybe an issue for them that's a red line is Medicare for all and then anti-Second Amendment. And somebody from the Libertarian side is going to have the inverse, right? They're going to be completely against Medicare for all and completely pro-Second Amendment. And so how have you been bridging those issues between those two groups?
Oh yeah, just it sounds funny, but it's serious to me, of just pointing out to people of, hey, we're all about to die. Like it's kind of how I sell it, because more importantly to me, a lot of the unity has come out of like the Assange left, like the Jimmy Dore left, and they're very aware of how the U.S. government is viewing all of us right now. They're very aware that like the first person charged under Joe Biden's new DVE guidelines wasn't a Trump person, wasn't a January 6th rioter, wasn't a white nationalist or anything. It was an environmentalist protester who was given 8 years in prison for the pipeline protests up in Montana. So like anyone who's not a rancid tribalist will sit there and be like, they're talking about like right-wing extremism on the news, but they're locking up environmental activists and giving them 8 years in prison. Oh God, like they're coming for all of us. And obviously I come out of that because I'm with that movement, and we're targeted probably more by the federal government than anyone since like the Black Panthers, in terms of how many of us they've arrested, harassed, how often they show up to our house and like threaten us and shit. So just going to like these lefties, across the spectrum, and people like Jimmy Dore and people like Max Blumenthal and the people that get it, and being like, hey, it's go time. We're in full helicopter money economy mode. Like we're talking about expanding the wars into like Ethiopia and Somalia and like expanding that. There's crazy war hawking around China. There's the whole like the domestic thing with the extremists and everything. Like we're in the end game now. So it's either we do something now or you become a doomsday prepper, because otherwise whatever you're doing is a waste of time, pretty much. Like it's. And that's why that's why my show that I do on YouTube is Unity or Death. Like, it's not just like, I thought it was a cool name. Like, that's how I view it, is either you are a unity activist right now, or you should be a doomsday prepper. I don't see, I view any other path as pointless, because all the political movements have stalled out. Like, I did a whole video yelling at my phone about this, of like, I'm sure even you guys would agree, of like, if there was 10,000 people in the street right now and they were like calling for the end of qualified immunity or something like that, and they were all like DSA, like AOC people, you'd probably go. If there was, there's 10,000 libertarians like having like a giant anti-gun control protest, you'd probably go. If there was, a bunch of like neocon conservative types that were talking about, like ending like a tax strike or something like that, you'd probably go.
Sure. Yeah.
None of that is happening. The DSA is stalled out. The Liberty movement's stalled out. The Green Party stalled out. The Republicans are still coping with the fact that Trump isn't the president, and they don't know, like they haven't done a single action ever since. So like, you can't just rely on one movement, and we can't just wait to grow one movement back to oppose this. Like we all need to come together right now and do something about this, or we're fucked. And I take that message, and to tie it back to the anti-war thing, is I go like, hey guys, like even in Joe Biden's speech about withdrawing out of Afghanistan that everybody's, like blowing him over and thinks is spectacular. In that very speech, he's like, we're going to expand counterterrorism operations in Asia, expand counterterrorism operations in Africa. And it's like, you see what's going on here. Like this is the moment. Like if we're going to end this, we need to come together now And it not to elect somebody, not like, oh, your next term will get it. I'm not going to fundraise for you. I'm not going to beg you. I'm not going to give you money. Like, people need to be in DC consistently as much as possible, being like, end these wars, end the damn wars now. Like, this is over. We can't push this anymore because they are rearing up for some wild Cold War II shit with China and everything that's going on with the mineral wars and stuff like that. And if we don't want essentially like a 9/11 part 2 or something, or blowback from our crazy imperialism all over the country comes back on us and starts this whole process over again, we should address it now.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the sort of domestic violent extremism angle and sort of the push that's growing against that. Right now, they're talking a lot about right-wingers, but I do think it's interesting how they're increasingly lumping together all, like, any anti-government people. It's almost like they're doing our job for us of, like, pushing these people into unity. I don't know how effective that is, but it does seem like they are increasingly lumping, COVID skeptics, Antifa type people, police protesters, and these right-wing militia guys. It seems like they are kind of being categorized in the same thing. And like, yeah, okay, fine, lump us all together. We are one united group. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, I mean, like, what the official bulletin had, like, PETA people along with like pro-choice extremists or some crazy, like, whatever they use that term.
Right.
But yeah, they are doing the work for us, but it's also because, like, not revolutionary kind of fervor in America of just like dramatic change has been growing like our entire lives, pretty much. Like, it went from the anonymous movement and 4chan and all of that into like the Tea Party stuff, into like the Bernie Sanders stuff, into the BLM and Antifa stuff. And now obviously you're seeing like militias pop up everywhere. This is growing. And to get Trump out of office, the Democrats like put a lot of water on those seeds, expanding like the BLM movement, expanding like Antifa and everything.
Yeah.
But then they wanted to do the same thing that happened to the anti-war movement of like, okay, Joe Biden's in, so now everybody can go home. These people didn't go home. They're still mad. They still like want to overthrow capitalism and stuff. And I think like the Joe Biden government has realized this and be like, oh, we need to like deal with these people. Because I mean, the night he got elected, Rose City Antifa went and burned down the DNC headquarters in Portland. Right. So it's like, yeah, these like, this isn't Obama 08 all over again, where all these activists are just going to go to sleep for 8 years, So I think that change is coming, crazy things are coming, and I do kind of buy into a lot of what you see Tim Pool and like Jack Posobiec and Jimmy Dore saying and stuff like that. Of it seems like we're heading for some kind of civil war, and it's not good. And the only, like, I consider the unity message to be the only way to stop that. So it's not only just, hey, we need to oppose like the military industrial complex, the domestic police state and all the other things libertarians would say, but it's also like, hey, this unity stuff also needs to happen because people want to kill each other. Like just last night, people were shooting at each other in Portland. And it's like, yeah, we need to pump the brakes on this. And that's why I view it as like the only way to really fix that. Because I don't think, electing a bunch of people or getting more views on a podcast or having viral tweets or something is going to solve that problem. It's going to require diligent on the ground work and across everything. And the anti-war thing's kind of like my first start with that. Because I also picked that to answer your original question. One of the main reasons is because it's the thing there is the most unity on, is the anti-war thing. Like you have everything from like explicit like Stalinists all the way to like actual neo-Nazis and everything in between who are anti-war. So it's like, okay, so if the spectrum's that wide, then we can show this is possible. And then, like I said, that feeds into the broader unity movement of, to use a more recent example, my buddy Andrew Zigerman, he's big in the Green Party in Ohio, and Spike came to Ohio. I got them hooked up beforehand, and they actually got together and did stuff in Ohio to end qualified immunity in Ohio. Before that, like, I can't, maybe it would have happened without me, But without me calling for unity, those two people may have never meshed up, and then there wouldn't have been the Green Party and the LP working together in Ohio. And then because that happened, the next time, there's something where there needs to be like a coalition on in a different state, I'd be like, well, hey, this happened here. In New Hampshire, the Free State Project worked together with the DSA to ban no-knock raids. Like that happened there, and showing people it's possible to kind of upsell more and more unity and make more and more unity possible. So that's, it is the end of the damn wars march, while also being an anti-war march, primarily to me is building those coalitions, building those names, expanding those contact lists, those email lists for everything outside of just war and anything that has to do with war. So if God forbid, like 3 years from now, some Somali terrorist totally on his own, no help from the CIA or anything, drives a bomb into like the Pentagon or something, there'll be a whole network of people that maybe never were on the same political side on anything else that have talked to each other and know each other and everything that can then come out then and be like, no, like we're not going, we're not starting another war.
Right. And just even if it's a matter of like, they go to the rally and for example, like Danny Sherjan meets like Scott or Spike Cohen for the first time. I almost said Scott Horn. Obviously they know each other. And, then, maybe Scott or Spike has Danny on or something like that. And that's a way to introduce these people to other audiences because, Danny is super articulate and could really, even to a libertarian audience, introduce them to arguments against war that are really powerful and work really well. He's also, a soldier. So, he could really give firsthand examples and stuff like that. So, those just even little benefits like that would be huge. I guess the last question I had for you, Magnus, was just, I feel like one of the biggest issues we have with the war issue is a lot of people, like 70% of Americans were for ending the Afghan war, and yet almost none of them would actually vote on it. And so how do we keep the war issue in the news? Because, they'll show footage all day long of one crowded hospital that they could find in Texas or Florida or something like that. But then they won't even bother to cover at all for years on end what's going on in Yemen, where there's hospital shortages all the time and kids are starving to death. We on our last show, we talked about the fact that last year in 2020, Afghanistan got 5 minutes of coverage from the network news during their mainstream hour, where, now they're suddenly covering it, but they pull their spin. So how do we keep this issue in the news? Because if it's not in the news, it's so hard to get people to, take a stand on it.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely like a 3-pronged kind of thing. The first one, to keep harping on it, is the unity thing of having these messages come from every direction possible, post-partisan, so it cannot be ignored. Because during Trump, any anti-war voice could be dismissed as some cringe SJW. Obviously, you guys probably remember during Obama, it's, oh, you're a racist. They'll try to deflect as much as possible. So having it come from as many voices as possible, coordinating, talking, having each other on the same show, everything, that's very important. And then on the ground, I harp on this all the time. Over the last couple years, people that are anywhere outside of kind of the DSA have really undervalued the importance of street activism. They think like protesting is pointless, that it'll never accomplish anything or nothing like that. The average person, the normie kind of like in the world, they don't follow you on Twitter. They don't know who Scott Horton is. The only news they see is CNN or something like that. If the mainstream's not telling them, then they're not going to know. And they're probably not watching your YouTube show. It's not being recommended in the algorithm. You're blacklisted, all of that. None of that matters if they get into their car to go to work and they pass 80 people on the side of the road with signs saying end war. Because then it goes into their brain. And that can't be suppressed, banned, censored. Cops might come out, but even then it has to be on the news that they broke up an anti-war protest. And that makes it real to people. 100%. Because if you look at like the BLM stuff, that was like a lot of people assumed that it died and in 2014 and everything, and then came back under George Floyd. Like, no, none of those people ever went away. The reason why it became real again is because people got out on the streets again. then like even if you never watch the news, because there's a lot of people that don't, they're just totally clueless to what the hell is going on in this world. You knew there was BLM protests because they were on the street right in front of you. So I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And then kind of like the final sort of capstone on that is pushing this information out in terms of like electoralism, whatever, it doesn't matter. Shows like this, shows like Scott Horton, like that wakes up like a person a day. Doesn't even matter. Having Tim Pool reference, you know, Yemen, and having Dave Smith on there talking about like, I think it was the first time Dave Smith went on, and he's like, I think Trump should be in prison for genocide in Yemen. And people are like, what? What do you mean? But saying that on Tim Pool's show in front of like probably like 80,000 people or something probably made a lot of people Google what's going on in Yemen and just, you know, information out there. Because I think the biggest issue in the anti-war movement is people don't know. Like I'll take one person being bored, like burnt out, like you described before, and like, I can't watch the show anymore because I'm exhausted. Well, if they watch your show enough to get exhausted, then they probably at least aware of what's going on in like Yemen and Somalia and shit like that.
Right.
Yeah.
The important thing is getting people to realize that, because I'll talk to people every day and be like, hey, do you know we've been bombing Somalia for 20 years? And they'll go, no. And it's like, you know, because the news doesn't talk about it. So that's kind of my 3-pronged approach to bringing this back and making it really important. And then obviously you have like crazy things that like Adam Kokesh is doing where they stand outside of recruiting offices for the military and like pass out flyers about like war crimes and shit to incentivize people not to join. So there's a lot of paths, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make a great point about like the need for street demos and stuff, because try as we might on the internet, we have a great reach on here, but with these algorithms, man, like, you know, sometimes you can't get outside of 100 people, you know, where you should be able to reach millions, where these, you know, public street demos, like they can't, you know, no algorithm can block that. So absolutely.
Right.
People are going to drive to their McDonald's. So if you're staying on the way and got a sign, they'll see you.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, the Gitmo protests are like a great example of this. I don't know if you remember this. I think this was 2014. I think it was 10 people dressed in orange jumpsuits and went out and I think it was in front of the FBI headquarters or something like that in DC, and with bags over their heads, and stood there for 6 hours. And that hit like national news. That was 6 people. They went on, it probably wasn't Amazon because it was 2014, but like they just like went online, bought cheap orange jumpsuits and literally burlap sacks and stood in front of a building and got national attention.
Yeah.
You know, so it's things like that. I really do believe internet culture has just annihilated activism, because everybody's just like, oh, bro, I got 100,000 views on my stream of complaining about war. And it's like, okay, probably like a quarter of those people aren't even in the United States. Probably a lot of them watching hate you and are just hate watching. And then once you cut those off, cool, you have your core group of fans that watch you every single week and are just like, sweet, you know?
Right.
You're not reaching the real world no matter what. Like, if my mother doesn't know who Tim Pool is, that shows you like where the normal people in the world are, you know?
Right.
I know people that don't even know who Joe Rogan is, and they're like, you know, so it's, we really overestimate how important the internet actually is when it comes to a lot of this.
Yeah, I always like it when I mention Rogan and somebody goes, the Fear Factor guy?
Right.
Cracks me up. Will, do you have any other questions?
No, I was going to just ask Magnus to plug again, any information or stuff for the group.
And then to add just to that question a little bit, for people who can't make it to DC, for example, I'm in the Denver area, so how can I find out information about that? Or if, people are in the, area where something's happening and want to get involved, where would they go to do that?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is we have a Discord server, and if you want to attend an event, join that Discord server, because that has all of the local organizers. Like we have like the person who's organizing the Denver protests and everything in there. And even if there isn't one for your area, get in there and we'll try to like connect people to do that. Because obviously like Twitter isn't great for that. And like, we don't want to play the game of telephone between like 5 people DMing each other back and forth. So get on that Discord. And even if there isn't a local event, we can help you set one up. We can send you like, the materials and everything of like the digital images and stuff you want to do. We'll promote it, all of that. So get into the Discord. You can just, my DMs are open Panvidya Magnus on Twitter. Just DM me and I'll add you to that Discord and we can figure it out.
All right. And then there's also, it's endthedamnwars.com is the URL, and
It's
the
org.
Twitter .org. And then the Twitter handle is endthedamnwars or Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Magnus, for coming on. This was great. And, you know, anybody, if you're in the area where there's something going on and you're somebody that likes to get out there, you know, think about doing it. And, you know, we got to stop these wars somehow, and we're doing what we can with this show, but there's definitely other ways and avenues. And this is one of them. Magnus, thanks so much for what you're doing to try and end these wars.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it.